This isn't Dubai, it's Iraq. The general view of Iraq is that it's war-torn and poverty-stricken. Decades of conflict have ravaged the country. For a nation that is one of the largest oil producers in the world, Iraqis are incredibly poor. But this actually isn't true of the whole country. In fact, one area, the Kurdistan Autonomous Region, has defied this fate. It's highly prosperous, especially compared to the rest of Iraq. So why has this one small region of Iraq been able to become so wealthy, especially when the rest of Iraq has remained so poor? On the morning of the 16th of March 1988, 14 Iraqi fighter jets bombarded the Iraqi Kurdish town of Halabja, about 9 miles from the Iranian border. They dropped mustard gas. 5,000 Kurdish people were killed and up to 10,000 injured in what was the largest chemical weapons attack against a civilian target in history. The Halabja massacre has since been described as an act of genocide. However, it would also play a key role in why the Kurdish region of Iraq was able to become so prosperous. The Kurds are an ethnic group indigenous to the mountainous region of Western Asia. They have their own language and distinct culture. Kurdish roots can be traced back centuries. Although the Kurds have been involved in many states throughout history, apart from in a brief period in the late 19th century, there has never been a Kurdish nation. As World War I came to a close and the Ottoman Empire collapsed, Kurdish nationalism came to the forefront and there were calls for an independent Kurdistan. However, disunity between Kurdish groups, combined with outside powers favouring the establishment of a Turkish state under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, and the mandates handed to Britain over Iraq and France over Syria, doomed these attempts to create a Kurdish nation. The result? Ethnic Kurds became trapped as minorities across Turkey, Iraq, Syria and Iran. This disaster for the Kurds consigned them to being economically neglected. It would take nearly a century for even one Kurdish area to become economically powerful.
Ageless Iraq is no longer a remote, isolated country. Today, she is a main junction linking the East and West. Her capital is Baghdad, a name that conjures up all the romance of Harun al-Rashid and the Arabian Nights of 1,000 years ago.
The modern state of Iraq was founded in 1921. Following World War I, the British had been granted a mandate over Mesopotamia. The British installed a Sunni Arab monarchy and then granted the territory independence in 1932. The British also established the borders of the modern Iraqi state, taking little consideration of religious and ethnic divisions. The combination of these factors resulted in decades of Sunni Arab dominance, first by the Hashemite royal family, then by the Republicans, and later the Ba'athist political group. Today, the general view is that Iraq failed as a state because of its arbitrary borders and ethnic divisions. This may be true, but it doesn't explain why just one region was able to become prosperous, nor why the rest of Iraq so completely failed. In 1975, UNESCO gave an award to the Deputy President of Iraq. The award was for the National Campaign for the Eradication of Illiteracy, which the Deputy President had led. Iraq's literacy rate had fallen dramatically as a result of the campaign, but UNESCO seemed happy to ignore that missing the reading classes ran by the campaign could land you 3 years in prison. 4 years later, that same Deputy President, Saddam Hussein, seized power in Iraq. UNESCO may have looked over Saddam Hussein's brutality, but soon the rest of the world would find it impossible to ignore.
Well, in the United States and Iraq are somewhat different. The United States voted out its leadership. We did not have President Bush. Does the Iraqi people have this type of choice? Always, when they talk about you, they talk about this is a country that is a dictatorship, and they say that you're a strong man and people cannot disagree with you.
الشعب العراقي لو كان ما مقتنع بقيادته كان طردها.
If the Iraqi people were not convinced in their leadership, they would have dismissed the leadership.
Iraq invaded Kuwait on the 2nd of August 1990. an international coalition led by the United States mobilized to drive Iraqi forces out of the country. The First Gulf War was a pivotal event for both Iraq and the Kurdistan region. Although the US-led coalition did not drive onto Baghdad and remove Saddam Hussein from power, they did encourage dispossessed groups within Iraq, including the Kurds, to rise up against his rule. Saddam responded to the Kurdish uprising with extreme brutality, culminating in the chemical weapons attack on Halabja. This atrocity shocked the world. US and European powers instigated a no-fly zone over Iraq. This in turn allowed Kurdish forces to drive Iraqi troops from the predominantly Kurdish regions in the north of the country. But the removal of Iraqi troops from Kurdish territory was not enough to secure the region's prosperity. In fact, soon Kurds would be fighting Kurds over economic control of the newly liberated lands. CIA case officer Robert Bayer arrived in Iraqi Kurdistan in January 1995. His objective was to establish a cell that could assassinate Saddam Hussein. But upon his arrival in Kurdish territory, Bayer did not find an ally who could assist him in his mission, but instead a full-blown civil war between Kurdish factions.
In a large area of Iraq, Saddam Hussein has already given up control. We travelled 200 miles across the northeast of the country. All the Iraqi soldiers had gone. The people call this Free Kurdistan. It's the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters, who are in command here.
Jalal Talabani founded the PUK, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, in 1975, bringing together a range of left-wing and intellectual Kurdish groups. The KDP, Kurdish Democratic Party, had been founded in 1945 in close collaboration with the Soviet Union. A key founding member of the KDP was Mustafa Barzani, who passed his dominant role in the political movement to his son Masoud Barzani in 1979. The mid-1970s had seen the KDP fight against the central Iraqi state. Upon their defeat, the PUK began a guerrilla campaign, also fighting for Kurdish autonomy. By 1985, both factions had united, allowing them to drive out Iraqi forces from the Kurdish areas by 1992. However, the alliance did not last long. Claims and counterclaims of subversion sparked clashes between the KDP and PUK. This led to a civil war within Iraqi Kurdistan, but only came to an end when it became clear that the central Iraqi government under Saddam Hussein was about to be toppled.
Any outlaw regime that has ties to terrorist groups and seeks or possesses weapons of mass destruction is a grave danger to the civilized world and will be confronted.
On the 1st of May 2003, President George H.W. Bush stood atop the USS Abraham Lincoln. Behind him was a huge banner proclaiming "Mission Accomplished." Anyone looking at that footage today, filmed only 40 days after America first invaded Iraq, would laugh. And they'd be right to. The US mission in Iraq was far from accomplished. However, for the Kurds, the US invasion had given them exactly what they wanted. The US invasion of Iraq in 2003 was perhaps the most ill-fated foreign policy venture of the 21st century, at least for Iraq. Perhaps not for Kurdistan, though. Although the invasion did succeed in removing Saddam Hussein from power, Iraq quickly fell into a sectarian conflict between Arab Sunni and Shia communities. However, having maintained significant autonomy since expelling Iraqi forces in 1992, the Kurdistan region saw little instability as a result of the US invasion. In fact, when a new Iraqi constitution was installed by the US in 2005, Kurdistan pushed for its autonomous status to be formalized. The Kurdistan Autonomous Region of Iraq was officially established on the 15th of October 2005. But although Kurdistan now had autonomy within a federal Iraq, there was no guarantee it would economically outperform the rest of the country. In fact, it would take events outside of Kurdistan's control in order for it to begin building wealth.
You being the oil minister of Iraq, a country its economy completely relies on oil, how significant is oil to running the functions of Iraq?
Oh, it is very significant. The oil revenue constitutes almost 92% of 2019 budget. It is an unhealthy situation.
The economy of Iraq essentially collapsed following the US invasion and subsequent civil wars. Iraq's economy today is almost entirely dependent on oil exports, which make up 61% of the country's GDP. Iraq's fractured political system has bred regionalism and is still dogged by sectarian divisions. An ineffective central state, combined with widespread corruption, has held Iraq back economically. Decades of conflict have not only destroyed infrastructure and displaced people, but made investors wary of putting their money into the country. The result is Iraq's economy is stagnant, unemployment is high, and good jobs for ordinary Iraqis are hard to find. The stability afforded to Kurdistan as a result of its autonomy within Iraq allowed it to adopt its own economic policies. The region's economy, although still highly dependent on oil exports, was able to diversify from an almost complete dependence on natural resources to include significant agricultural and tourism sectors. Kurdistan's ability to avoid armed conflict, unlike the rest of Iraq, meant that infrastructure was not damaged, and the region's strong security apparatus meant businesses, both domestic and international, were more likely to invest in the Kurdistan region than the rest of Iraq. This regional peace also resulted in many prosperous Iraqis from outside the Kurdistan region moving to within its borders, bringing their wealth and business acronym with them. Although this resulted in intellectual and financial drain away from other areas of Iraq, especially those closest to Kurdistan, the Kurdistan Autonomous Region has been able to benefit economically from this movement of capital and people. There is no denying that Kurdistan is the most economically diverse and dynamic region of Iraq. However, the fact that this is based on the region's stability and ability to avoid armed conflict means that the Kurdistan Autonomous Region must maintain this status if it is to remain prosperous. In a challenging region like the one Kurdistan finds itself in, there is no guarantee it will be able to do this.
Damn, it was bed made and everything.